Diego people, I'm Sandra Moss. Today we're talking about what parents need to know as their children get ready to head back to school. It can be a stressful time for both parent and students. So here to give us some tips is Dr. Cheryl Rode. She's Senior Director of Clinical Programs for the San Diego Center for Children. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so getting them up, I think, is the biggest challenge for many parents. You've had fun in the sun all summer long,
right,
and then you've got that schedule, and the alarm goes off at 6 o'clock or 6:30, time to get up, and that can be a challenge.
Right. So instead of starting out that first Monday morning with that challenge, start that routine a little bit earlier. Our kids need a good night's sleep in order to be good problem solvers, to think well in school. So we need to help them with that. We need to get them to bed at a reasonable hour, turn off the media, and get that bedtime routine in place about a week before school starts if you can. And getting them to bed sometimes is the toughest thing, but it's better than that struggle in the morning.
Right. And when it comes to routines, getting them into the routine of doing their homework at a regular time or even doing it at all can also be a challenge.
Right. So having a particular space and time in the household where that homework happens. Again, turn off the TV and the other media, put the phones aside. Work to do, sit down with your kid at the same time. You know, then you're modeling for them, this is my work time and we're working together. That can be a great way to encourage that behavior.
Start of a new year means a start of a clean slate. Everybody has an A at the beginning of the school year. What are some tips for getting children motivated to try their best, to do their best, to be excited about school?
I think helping kids set their own goals. Kids have, ideas about who they want to be when they grow up and what they want to achieve. And so talking about those goals and encouraging them, you want to be a scientist when you grow up, and I know that's your next guest is going to talk about that. That's great. What do you need to do to be a scientist? You probably need to know math and you need to know writing. How can we make sure that we're focusing on those together?
You know, and being in the classroom these days, the technology is amazing. There are so many ways to succeed, but there are also a lot of new stresses that we didn't have when we were going to school as well. Social media comes to mind, and everybody is involved in social media now, and that brings up the subject of bullying, which is really something that's on everybody's mind now.
It is unfortunately very common, and it's a form of aggression, but it can be physical, it can be verbal, it can be social, it can be in cyberspace. And so we really need to prepare our kids to know what it is, to know how to handle it. Most importantly, we need to have our kids talk to us. Let us know when they think it's happening, when they feel it, and to identify trusted adults at school that they can talk to as well.
How common is bullying? I mean, we've been hearing about it a lot. But
very common. The statistics are about 1 in 6 kids report that they experience bullying at all ages and grades.
And do you feel that schools are doing enough to combat it and to listen to the students who are being bullied?
I think schools are learning a lot. There are a lot of great programs out there that schools have access to. I think it's wonderful to ask that at the beginning of the year. How do you address bullying? Do you have a bully prevention program here on campus? Is my son or daughter going to learn about what bullying is and how to respond? And most schools these days do, so get engaged in that.
Right. I think it's embarrassing for students, especially when you get into the middle school years, to really go to your parents and talk about something like that. A lot of kids will think, I've got this.
I can handle it.
Right.
I can handle it.
How do you tackle that?
Well, I think having open conversations with your kids, so bringing it up frequently. Pull up websites. There are some great websites out there that talk about bullying, and they talk from a teen's language. So sometimes as a parent, if we don't quite have the right words, give them tools that talk in their language. And again, bring it up frequently. It's not a one-time conversation. It's a regular conversation.
And something that I think affects every student is stress and the competition to succeed. In today's modern world, a lot of parents have very high expectations for their children. And the competition out there, not only academically, but athletically, socially, in so many ways, is immense. How do you deal with making sure that your child has a good emotional grounding?
Well, again, open conversation so that you kind of have your finger on the pulse of where your child is at emotionally. What kinds of things are stressful for them? Some kids love competition and they just dive in and, it's what makes them excited. Other kids absolutely dread it. So we need to have those conversations with our kids. What makes you stressed? What skills do you have to manage that? Parents want to jump in and rescue, so let me talk about that for a minute, because that's the hardest thing. We don't want to see our kids struggle and fail. We want to step in and rescue, but sometimes our kids need to make mistakes and they need to experience some failure in order to grow. That's how we learn coping skills. That's how we learn resiliency and self-confidence. We handle our mistakes and we learn from them, and so as parents, we have to give our kids some space and certainly support to let them do that. And we can always step in if it reaches a more critical issue, but we've got to give them those opportunities.
So give us an example of, I know that it's, as a parent, it's horrible to see, you know, your child in distress or failure. You do want to jump in for the save if they need that. What is an example of maybe when a parent needs to step back, and what is an acceptable failure?
Sure. Schoolwork is probably a great example. So your child who says, I left my book at school, I can't get my work done, and you want to run out and buy a new book, right? So problem solving, well, could you do some of the work? What will happen if you don't get that done tomorrow? So we need to stay calm. We need to not get into the panic. Oh no, you forgot your book. So we need to be calm and help them to problem solve. Well, I could go in early and I could get the work done in the morning. I could call a friend. So have your child generate those ideas and then encourage that. For me, it's the, Mom, I left my homework. Can you drive it to school in the morning, as I'm getting ready to go off to work? And it's really hard to say no, but sometimes we have to say no.
And they learn by that as well.
And they learn by that.
What about some signs to look out for in case that maybe are signs that your child is not doing well emotionally or in school, like, you know, a laundry list of, I guess, warning signs?
Sure. Well, going back to school, we're going to see all kinds of emotions with our kids. That's normal, you know, from excitement to absolute dread. So know that that's typical, and kids can go through an emotional state in a day. You have kids, you've seen that roller coaster. What we're looking for is when that emotionality is more severe or more persistent. So all kids have the occasional tantrum, but the daily tantrums. Tantrums for older kids. When we get to the point where it's going from anger to aggression, those are really important warning signs. Kids who don't want to go to school, who are saying, I don't really want to go to school. No, I have a headache or maybe a little stomach ache. Can I stay home? Really important to watch for that as maybe signs of stress or anxiety, and to address that very quickly rather than say, okay, you can stay home again today. Other things we want to look for, substance abuse. We cannot normalize drug and alcohol use in our teens. It's not normal, typical behavior, and it puts our kids at really high risk for continuing to engage in substance use and to develop problems into adulthood. So we need to address that very quickly. Changes in typical patterns, eating, sleeping, who we hang out with at school, how much time we're active and about. So when we notice those kinds of changes, that's a time to step in and to ask questions.
And who is the first person you contact at the school? Would it be the counselor? Would it be the principal? Who's the go-to person if you're recognizing some of these signs?
Right. Well, one of my recommendations is to be an involved parent. So know who the folks are at school. Know who's the best contact, because it may be different at each school. You might have a great relationship with your teacher, and that's the first person you're comfortable talking to. Other schools, maybe the principal. You know that principal is going to be responsive and have resources and solutions. So I think for parents to be engaged in the school and to know who those folks are is very helpful.
And schools are usually pretty good about that as well.
Yes.
Dr. Cheryl Rode, thank you so much for your advice.
It's my pleasure.
And have a great school year.
Thanks.
Okay. Still ahead on San Diego.